right? Right, so they're basically saying character balance so far, number one, you're able to get a ton of spell suppression because there is loads of it, like 30% on a shield, 30% on a chest. So because it's so easy to get, it feels like you need to get it, right? Which makes sense. But the reason you feel like you need to get it is not because, hey, it's easy to get, but because it's really good. And if you don't have cap spell suppression, you just get one shot. So I'm not sure about that. So they've nerfed all of the items that have it. So everything is now legacy spell suppression. So it's going on like the glove chance, the implicits, the boots. And then the spell suppression chance on like passives is going from like 12 instead of 10, 5 instead of 4, etc, etc. So basically, if you want cap spell suppression, you're going to have to go on the right hand side of the tree. But then that doesn't really solve the problem, because if the game requires cap spell suppression for some reason, then everyone is going to have to play as like a ranger, right? Right, next. Problem. Arctic armor does not grant enough defensive power to compete. Yeah, I agree, it's pointless. Substantially increase the amount of damage reduction while stationary. Most builds, not every build, but a lot of builds, standing still is a death sentence. Very rarely do you actually want to stand still in PoE, apart from specific builds. So it now grants 11 to 21, previously 8 to 13, and it gets 20% fire damage. So 21% less fizz. So basically it's got 8% physical damage boost, and you have to stand still. The Labyrinth enchant that gives increased armor buff effect can no longer be obtained. Get on PoE trade and start buying your legacy armor buff effects. I don't think anyone's using that. Wait a minute, let me think about this. What would be the old Arctic armor value, 13%, with the enchant? It's like 150% increased buff effect, right? And people still didn't use Arctic armor. I don't think Arctic armor is going to be used. Next, Flesh and Stone is not powerful enough to warrant 25% mana res. Okay, yeah, I agree. Flesh and Stone now gives you a little bit less damage from attacks. Might still struggle to want to fit that in, but it's a little bit better. Now, Defiance Banner, right? Defiance Banner, that everybody used Defiance Banner. So it says it provides a substantial percentage increase to armor and evasion on top of other benefits for low investment, right? So it now gives 24% evasion and armor instead of 49 at the top rank. And it now grants nearby enemies have 40% reduced crit chance rather than 29. Anomalous Defiance Banner grants you percent. I think I've actually... Oh, that's got nerfed as well, has it? Right. So Anomalous has got nerfed as well. Right, so it's basically wanting you to get a little bit closer to reduce the crit chance, but you also have less evasion. I'm not seeing any... I'm seeing a lot of stuff that makes sense. I'm seeing a lot of stuff that makes sense. Like, yeah, these are all a problem. But the reason people are stacking defense is because if you don't, you get destroyed. So now what do? We're now going to be searching for the next busted combination, and then everybody will go to that one. In my opinion, you should make loads of things broken, and then you can pick what you want to use, rather than nerfing everything, and then everybody desperately scrambling to find the one thing that's good. Wind Dancer Keystone. The drawback of taking 20% more attack damage if you've been hit by an attack is too risky. Yeah. Change Wind Dancer to be less risky for the large amounts of evasion. Wind Dancer no longer provides 40% more evasion if you've been hit. Instead, provides 10% more chance to evade if you've been hit by an attack. So you just get flat chance to evade rather than flat evasion. I guess that's a little bit of a help, but the arrow dancing keystone penalty to melee evasion feels too punishing. No longer provides 40% chance to evade. It's going to now obviously give... Oh, it now provides evasion rate and is doubled against projectile attacks. So you want to stack... So it's asking you to stack a load more evasion and go on the right-hand side of the tree, I think. That's what they're asking you to do. But the problem with evasion characters is, for softcore, they're alright, because if you don't get hit, it's wonderful and you can be zippy and everything. But in hardcore, you don't really want your main source of defense to be evasion, because eventually you won't dodge unless you can somehow get capped, but I don't even think you can do that anymore. Ward. So Ward was a niche defensive character, but is currently mainly strong when paired with unique flasks and not worth it. Ward now instantly restores after 4 seconds instead of 5. 5 new suffix modifiers that can roll Ward. I don't really understand what Ward is, to be honest, so maybe somebody can tell me, but I'm pretty sure, like, unless you're doing an absolutely mega specific build, Ward is pretty bad. Problem, the Grasping Mail modifier that provides 100% global increased defenses provides too much value. Now here's the thing, right? To get one of these is so this is where PoE, I feel like, does my head in. To get a 100% increased global defenses chest with any sort of decent modifiers is so expensive. I feel like once you've reached that level of power, you deserve to be a bit overpowered. PoE does not want the player to be overpowered, whereas the player fantasy in an ARPG is to get overpowered and shit on everything. So it now has 50%. Existing items can be made worse with the Divine Orb, so now that is Legacy. Standard people rubbing their hands together. The Gravicious Veiled modifier that grants 12 to 14% of your maximum life as ES has been replaced by a modifier that grants 8 to 9% fizz damage taken as fire and 9% of physical damage taken as lightning. Right, so they're saying it grants percentage life as ES and adds a huge amount of survivability. Granting ES to life-based builds was not often viable in the past. I think that was good though. Some builds... So here was the actual reason that this happened, because I've used this on a lot of my builds. To get enough defense to feel like your build isn't trash, you would have to give up a lot of life on gear and the tree, and then that mod made up for it, so you had a pretty solid build. Without that, you're going to be quite low effective life pool, and on top, your defenses are also now nerfed, so it's going to be either harder to get gear, more expensive, and I feel like you're just going to be mega nerfed again. Honestly, I get the idea behind it, but I feel like they're missing the main issue. Is the reason everyone was stacking defense was because you had to. Passive skills that grant blind effect do not reward. Yeah, there's no point like stacking blind or something, apart from maybe like some random build. 40% increased blind effects instead of 30, 15% blind instead of 10, and blind effect has a value of 40% increase instead of 30. Mind over matter builds that invest into heavy in mana have been left in an underpowered state. As a first step to improve mind over matter builds and pull power out of body armor mods, we're aware that this doesn't solve all current problems. Let's see what they did. Mind over matter causes 40% of damage to be taken from mana, previously 30. Damage taken from mana before life can no longer roll as an influence modifier, synthesize modifier, or... So they just took that away. So, like, here's the confusing thing, right? It says damage taken from mana before life can no longer roll as an influence modifier. I don't know what that value was, but I imagine it was like 5 to 10% or something like that. And then they've put that onto the keystone, so you no longer need that 40%, so maybe you can use that implicit to get something else. But in the end, the 30% plus the influenced or synth modifier probably equals what the current new keystone does anyway, so that really hasn't done too much. Cloak of Defiance no longer has 10% of its damage taken from mana before life. So that's just... Well, every Mind Over Matter build that I've played used that. So you would have 30 on the keystone and then 10 there, so that was 40. So now you just have 40 from the keystone. And now, I guess now they're saying you don't need Cloak of Defiance, or you can do some other option, but that seems a bit weird. The Veiled modifier is now been nerfed from 25% from 15. Right. So they want you to be able to get a lot more mana to take damage as mana before your life. So previously you could get 25% plus a synth modifier. I don't know what that value is. Let's say it was 10. That's 35. 10 from your body armor was 45, and then 30 from the keystone is 75%. Let's just make that up. And now you can get 40%. You can't get the influence mod. You can't get the chess piece mod. And you can now get 15. So you can get 55. Like, am I dumb, or is that not good? Fortification is too difficult to gain for some builds. Melee hits that now fortify grant twice as many stacks. This is what ends up happening, right? They nerf everything, and then something gets quite a big buff, and now everyone will be going, right guys, stack Fortify. So Fortify got buffed. Minion Balance is a game about finding items to improve your character. Minion builds historically got most of their character power from gems. Yeah, that's because I feel like there needs to be a class in the game that is beneficial from not having a ton of gear, because SSF and budget builds, etc., and chill builds. So let's see what they did. Problem: there are limited options to invest in minion-related stats on gear, meaning their base stats have to be inflated. This leads to most minion builds caring little about itemization, and also limits the potential to scale high-end minion builds. So what they're at, this is a very, right, so this is PoE. This is a very clever way of saying, guys, we're going to give you the player power fantasy of now being able to scale a high-end minion build with better items. But what that actually means is, rather than having a high-end build with no items, because it's all on the stats and the specters and whatever, we're now going to make you get them through items. So now minions are actually getting nerfed, right? So it's making it sound like the players are going to have more fun because now they get to look for items, but really, they now have to look for items. So I'm not going to read all of this because this is long, right? Basically, it looks like bone rings can roll minion modifiers, some minion skill changes, some changes to bases, a new one type that can reveal minion related modifiers. Helmets can no longer roll 1 to 3 socketed minion gems. Instead, they can roll 1 to 2. And then they say there's a vendor recipe with a +1 level to minion gems. Happy hunting. But here's the thing, you're only really going to use a +1 in SSF or early leveling, and then effectively it's now been nerfed, so you've lost a level. You can now corrupt them to have +2 socketed minion gems. Ghastly Eye Jewels have had their pool updated. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I honestly don't think that's a great thing. That sounds pretty pants. Instead of minions have X% increased max life, they now have all res. Yeah, I know you do need some all res on minions, but that's just minions basically saying, we've removed the power, and now you're going to have to really get it on your gear. I bet a lot of people will be upset because people love cheap minion builds. Next problem, because minions are monsters, they inherited some stats from monsters that can significantly affect build choices and power. As these stats are not detailed anywhere in the game, they're a cause of confusion. PoE is pretty funny in this regard. Like, this is the thing that causes confusion, not all the other things. This, right? So the large damage bonus granted to minions by frenzy and power charges also crowded out alternative options. Minions no longer have hidden penalties to bleeding, ignite, and poison damage. Summon Reaper no longer has a hidden bonus to bleeding damage that counteracted this penalty. As a result, minions now deal approximately twice as much poison damage, 3.5 times much ignite damage, and 7 times as much bleed damage. What? Minions now gain the same bonus from endurance, power charge, and frenzies and players do, rather than significantly elevated. Right. So they've nerfed the charge generation. The only I don't really know much about minions. I just know you had that ape that did the fucking roar and he gives you frenzy charges. That's the only thing I know about bloody minions. So the charges don't do as much, but you're going to be doing 7 times as much bleed damage. I'm just imagining someone in POB sat in a dark room, absolutely resident sleeper with 865 wikis open, crafting the one-shot bleed Spectre build. I don't know how that's going to go on, but that sounds weird. That to me sounds like, hey, you're no longer doing basic minion builds, you're now doing ignite or bleed minions or something. Investing in minion critical strikes has been possible in a very niche manner for some time, but has never been supported. So, solution, add more options for crit, so minion crit. These changes are not fully compensate for the loss of critical strike, but more in... They do make me laugh. They do make me laugh. So basically, right, they've said you're not having any good power charges that help minions crit. And we haven't really supported crit before, but players obviously just got it through the power charges. And now they've said, but we're not adding crit to compensate for the loss of the crit chance from power charges, but instead to more than make up for the lost damage via the multiple sources of crit multi. The Spirit Offering Gem no longer grants elemental or chaos res to minion, and no longer gives them fizz as extra chaos. They now get crit chance and crit multi. A lot of the stuff, maybe I'm just stupid, but as a layman, a lot of the stuff they do, I'm a bit confused about. So they've basically said, you are not having power charges because we don't want you to crit. And then they say, now, instead of having fizz as chaos, you now get crit and multi. Right? Maybe they're just trying to make it less confusing, so like you just basically get crit and multi without having to generate charges. I don't know. Or maybe that means you don't have to use a Spectre to generate charges, and you can now use a different minion. I'm not sure about minions. They're a different breed that minion players. Unnatural strength is extremely strong for almost all minion builds. It no longer provides +2 to all minion gems. Right, so it is kind of like they word it in a very clever way, but basically it's nerfs. So they're saying you can't get Fizz's extra chaos, which is called Unholy Might. So they're now saying you can't get the +2, but you can get Unholy Might. So basically, you've lost Spectre crit charges, but you've regained it through the gem. You've lost Unholy Might, but you've regained it. So basically, you've lost +2 levels. So there's a lot of plus levels disappearing. Now we've got skill balance. Problem. Skills that cause corpse explosion are currently able to deal more damage than intended due to an oversight caused Auric Champion and Auric Colossus corpses to have 60% more life than any other corpse and can be spawned by Desecrate. Solution. Reduce the life. Problem. Skills that cause corpse explosions derive much of their damage from increasing max life, yeah. So mostly from skills on the passive tree. This pressurizes builds utilizing these skills to choose the Necromancer, as it provides a large value of this stat, and means corpse enemies that you kill are not useful for damage compared to corpses you spawn yourself. Additionally, since the percentage of corpse life dealt as damage by these skills do not scale with skill levels, there is not significant or sufficient incentive to level them up. So they have removed max corpse life as a stat from the necromancer and reduced the values elsewhere. Increase the percentage of corpse life dealt as damage from corpse explosions. Right, so it's just a flat out nerf to DD. You've lost 50% increased maximum life on a DD corpse, which is massive, right? Because if you're detonating dead, you're dealing damage based on the life, and they've lost your life. Phantasmal Unearth, you've lost 20% life. DD, you've got slightly more life on a gem level. So they've tried to give you a little bit of power back through, like, other areas, but it's still a nerf. This is where I love PoE. This is why PoE is like so funny. When they say stuff like, when fire traps hit damage was buffed, the damage over time was too strong on the ground. And it's like, how many people were really running around playing fire trap? Like, did it really need to be nerfed like that hard? So fire trap's been nerfed. No longer has skill duration. We've also got flamethrower trap. Gets a small, like, 50 DPS buff. Lightning spire trap gets one and has better added effectiveness. So there's a few more traps that do a bit more damage. Explosive arrow currently has a single stat for hitting ailment per damage, but this makes it impossible to reduce the damage by overperforming ignite builds without also affecting the hit builds. So you can now scale hits. Problem: when spell damages were changed in 3.17, triggering spells had a lot of power, reducing the compensation cast when damage taken and cast on death were omitted. Increase the damage penalty of cast when damage taken support and reduce the damage. So basically, I think this is to do with that stupid build where you kill yourself and then blow up the boss. So it's lost 152% more damage. I think that build did so much damage that they could probably just kill themselves once more on softcore, because obviously you're only using a cast on death boss in softcore and you'd still be fine. So I think that build, unless I'm massively underestimating it, will probably still exist. Oh no, don't nerf Sniper's Mark. I want to say Sniper's Mark was the only reason the game was fun. Are they going to nerf Sniper's Mark? Sniper's Mark provided a large amount of power to proj builds, but also provided flash charge generation. Even though it's rarely consideration. Yeah, I didn't really consider that, to be honest. Solution: remove the life and mana flash generation from Sniper's Mark. That's not too bad. I'll take that. Hydrosphere was previously commonly used to provide an extra target to hit. Yeah. A cooldown was added to be able to hit, but this cooldown isn't necessarily per entity, meaning the Hydrosphere still provides an enormous damage boost. Only allow one Hydrosphere to be hit. I don't feel like you should be going out of your way to nerf builds that require multiple buttons. Like, if you have to put a Hydrosphere down, position it, and then shoot, that shouldn't be on the high tier list for nerfs as compared to like a one button kills all. Problem: due to PoE's constant evolution, there are some skills and support gems that are feeling underwhelming to use. Carry out a routine balance pass on underperforming skills. So I will say, I think PoE is really, really good in how it clearly communicates, and it does constantly update, you know, compared to some other games. So I'm never going to bash it, but some not questionable stuff in it. I just feel like the game's probably going to feel worse. You're just going to struggle with defense, probably. So these are all of the balance passes. So, looks like we'll just do nerf buff, right? Looks like artillery ballista buff, blazing salvo buff, cleave range buff. I'd like to play cleave. I don't mind cleave. Cleave and reeve, pretty fun. Beam width on crackling lance. Totem decoy totem life massively increased. Devouring totem increased. Energy blade buff. Firestorm buff. Haste. Haste now grants 10% move speed and 15 attack and cast speed at level 1. Previously 4 and 9. So level 1 haste is pretty good. At level 20, it was 15 and 24. It's now 15 and 24. It was 9 and 16. So it's not bad. You might find some people using haste. Yeah, Energy Blade has a 20% more buff. Rejuve Totem now has more base life. Scorching Ray buff. I'd quite like to play Scorching Ray. That's interesting. Scourge Arrow. 2% more damage effectiveness. No. 5% damage effectiveness. It's gone up. Shock Nova has 10% of chance to shock. So you can get a lot more shock from Shock Nova. Soul Rend. Looks like that is getting a buff. Yep. Spell Slinger now grants added spell damage equal to 60% of damage equipped wand at gem level 1. Previously 50%. Up to 174. Previously 100%. So it got 70%. 74% increased damage of equipped wand. So maybe there's some kind of spell slinger you can do. Good old Sunder has now had 50% effectiveness at level 20. And its damaging wave now travels 60% faster. That's pretty big. There might be some Sunder players back on the menu. Especially with Fortify being buffed, I can easily see people lean into Fortify and Sunder. Valve Flame Blast now has 200% more spell damage for each stage, previously 140. That's pretty big. So it has 200% more for each stage. So it's 60% more per stage. That could be interesting. Valve Flame Blast. And then there's some other gems getting buffed. Right, the Trickster, yeah, the Trickster's pretty bad. So, what they've done to the Trickster is Juggernaut's Unbreakable Notable Ascendancy passive skill no longer grants regen and reduced damage. It now grants 8% of armor applies to elemental damage from hits. Oh, sorry. So they're just saying rework the Trickster. That's what they're saying. So they're not revealing it. They're just reworking the Trickster. Now, Juggernaut's Unbreakable skill is overly complicated and requires each stat to be watered down, meaning the players aren't able to focus on what they want. I feel like that's pretty good, right? 8% of armor to elemental damage, because the one thing Juggernaut obviously is weak against is elemental damage. Oh, you know what I could see myself doing? A Juggernaut Sunder build. Added a notable ascendancy to Juggernaut Untiring. 40% life regen and 1.5% of fizz damage from hits. Right. Problem, Chieftain doesn't provide enough damage to be attractive to slam base builds, yeah. Slams used by Tawawa's Chosen now deals 100% more damage, previously 50%. So you're getting 50% more damage off a slam. That's pretty big. Pathfinders is quite weak. Added more power to the Alchemist, which is flasks. Okay. 20 ascendancy skill no longer grants 20% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite. It now causes. Wow. So you don't have chance to freeze, shock, and ignite during flask effect. Instead, you get 20% increased flask effect. That's going to be big and also kind of suck for some builds, because some builds would like that chance to freeze, shock, and ignite, but you could probably get that in other areas of your tree and gear, so that's pretty good. The fact that you get kind of a mini mage blood, you get the increase effect. You no longer get reduced elemental damage taken though. Oh, here we go. Crystallized, Omniscience, and Ashes of the Stars are powerful, unique items. Now, before I've read it, I like the fact that they're super OP, but really rare. Let's see what they did. Ashes of the Stars is a relatively standalone item that enhances the individual strength. Crystallized Omniscience encourages players to devote a substantial portion of their build to stacking attributes. This is what makes me laugh. They're like, yeah, Crystallized Omniscience is apparently encouraging players to devote a substantial portion of their build to stacking attributes. Well, yeah, that's what the item is, and you made it. Like, that's all the item does, so obviously players are going to do that. Solution: lower the amount of elemental pen and res granted by Crystallized Omniscience, with the aim of it still being powerful, but not the ideal choice. Crystallized Omniscience now grants +1 to all res per 15, previously per 10, and 1% pen per 15 omniscience. It's still going to be the best, right? That's so much penetration. I think I could be completely wrong. Maybe the number was, I think I had about 2,000 omniscience, right? So with 2,000 omniscience, I'd have what? 10 to all res. Like 100 to all res. Is that what I'd have? Am I being thick here? I still think it's going to be really good. But I tell you what they won't do. I tell you where this is where PoE goes wrong. Is they won't then nerf the drop rate, because the drop rate is so obscene because of how strong it is. They'll just keep the same drop rate. And then you'll have those people doing profitability guides, and they'll say it's still so rare, but it's not worth 50x anymore, it's worth 20, so don't bother. Some shit like that. Meldin of the Flesh is a unique jewel that transfers your highest max elemental resistance to your other elemental resistance. Added a penalty to maximum elemental resistance using Meldin of the Flesh, forcing builds that want to reach 90% to commit more. I'm not too sure what the item does. It says it transfers your highest max elemental res to your other elemental reses. Oh, is this the one where it's like you get -100 fire and lightning, but your cold is all of you, it applies to everything or whatever it is? It's like, it's one of those types of things, in it. You have to get a ton of one res that then applies to all. So you're gonna have to be it. And now is -4 to -6 to all res. Oh, right. So this is going to add a flat minus. That's probably going to make it really difficult to cap your reses out, right? Well, not cap your reses, I mean to get like over cap to 90. Man, this is a long ass balance patch. Problem: the base crit chance provided by brittle ailments serves as an enormous damage boost. Yeah, I use that on my boots, the brittle boots. Reduce the amount of crit chance provided by brittle to make it more comparable. It was like 5, right? So it now provides 2% flat. And it now grants 6% chance less I mean, it's still, in a way, it's still like a crit watcher's eye, so it's still pretty good, but it's not busted. Yo man, take it easy, Askia. The introduction of reservation efficiency has encouraged a much larger range of builds to invest in reservation. This is not a problem in itself, but currently the options for doing so are very similar. Provide slightly too much generic power. Remove the mana efficiency mastery and reduce the power of reservation. So it's just harder to get reservation. Okay, that's a bit poor. I don't like those because it just makes it really awkward when you mana problems. The line of flash modifiers that grant charges when you are hit has been changed. Lower the value of the flash modifiers that grant charges when you are hit. So that just stops it. That's just charge generation is down. We've got veiled crafted modifiers that made skills cost no mana or life whilst focused. As mentioned, we originally planned to disable them, but this was pushed back. So they've got rid of that. The no cost to mana whilst focused. The timeless dual Chainbreaker keystone is too difficult to use properly, whilst limiting the potential to provide other sources of rage regen. Rework Chainbreaker to lean into rage as a resource in a more extreme manner and remove potentially unwanted. I don't know what Chainbreaker is, but they've tweaked Chainbreaker. So it now grants 1 rage regen for every 25 mana from regen is not applied and skills cost +3 rage. It now grants 1 rage per... Okay, so you're getting more rage generation. Crimson, Viridian and Cobalt jewels can now roll 4 to 6% life of damage taken as life as a suffix. I feel like those types of jewels, they're okay. But there's kind of weird, like, I don't think I'd ever make a jewel where I'm like, hey, nice, I get 4% of damage taken recouped as life. I mean, I guess if you stacked like 4 or 5 jewels at 6%, you could get 30% of damage taken as life, which isn't bad, I suppose. Maybe. Doesn't seem too bad. I don't think it's the worst set of nerfs we've ever seen in PoE. A lot of it makes sense, but I just get the feeling that overall it's going to be slightly harder to gear, and you're going to want to be playing a ranger or the right hand side of the tree to get your spell suppression up, or you're going to want to play something fortify based, I think. Or I think based off that, I could see myself playing Juggernaut Sunder League Start, honestly. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll chuck that up on YouTube, seeing as though I chatted about it. So yeah, that was a run through of the character balance in PoE. Lake of Calandra, let me know what you think